My husband died in a car accident, and I just discovered we're tens of thousands of dollars in debt. Forgive me if this is a little disjointed. I am still reeling from trying to wrap my head around my current situation. My husband passed away very suddenly recently, and in the weeks since his passing I have discovered that he was keeping huge secrets from me. In going through our financial information, I have discovered multiple credit cards in his, mine and the kids' names that are at maximum balance, 2 sets of loan papers from different banks for over $20,000. Paperwork that says our mortgage is 4 months behind, and a ton of other things that I can barely make sense of. From what I can tell, his business hasn't been making any actual money in over a year, and our savings accounts are drained. There is evidence that he has been using some gambling website and has lost thousands and thousands of dollars. I've been a stay-at-home mom for our entire marriage, and he owned his own business, so he handled everything with the money. I have no idea how to deal with any of this or what to do. I know I need a lawyer, but our accounts are pretty much empty, and I am at a total loss over what to do. Are there any free legal options I can look into? I have tried to call a bunch of lawyers, and all of them have said they won't give out any advice or counsel over the phone. Am I liable for all this debt, even though I didn't consent to my name and certainly not my kids' names being used to open credit cards? I feel like an idiot for being this uninformed, but I am completely unprepared to deal with this, and I am terrified we are going to lose our house and worse. I never in a million years dreamed he would do this to us. Can anyone point me in the right direction, please? Comment 1. I'm so sorry you're going through this. It's a lot to process. You might want to look into contacting a legal aid organization. They offer free or low-cost consultations for situations like yours. They can help you understand your rights and guide you through the process. Comment 2. Do. You're not alone in this, and you absolutely shouldn't feel like an idiot. Start by gathering all the documents you can find, and make sure you reach out to a bankruptcy or family law attorney who might be able to help with your situation. Update 1. I wanted to give you an update since so many people gave advice and said such kind things. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented and gave me advice. I'm sorry I didn't respond on the other post. I was just so completely overwhelmed. I still am, really. But I did read every comment and message, and I appreciate everyone that took the time to comment. I was able to find some legal help, and we are working on sorting out the mess my family is in. Things were far worse than I even knew when I made my first post. Altogether, the debt that was accumulated is close to $500,000. At this point, I have no idea how much I am going to end up responsible for. The lawyer has said it could take years to sort everything out. No matter what happens, we are going to be losing the house. I am working on finding us somewhere to stay before they actually foreclose, so we don't get evicted, and have that on my record too. I want to try to answer some of the questions and advice people mentioned in the other post. I have 3 kids, so that is the we that I keep saying. The older 2 are from a previous relationship, but I have contacted Social Security to get benefits started for my youngest. Thank you to the user who mentioned that. My husband's business was a computer tech repair company he ran by himself. He had a few people he would call in to help with larger jobs, but 95% of everything was him alone. The last year or so, it appears he wasn't doing any actual work and there was no money coming in. He took money from the business to cover what he took from our personal accounts, and then took out loans to cover the business and pissed it all away on gambling and other illegal activities that have come to light over the past few weeks. Sorry to be vague. It's just embarrassing and hard to talk about. To the people who said that maybe the crash was intentional, it is looking increasingly likely that it was. Nobody else was involved. His car went off the road and hit a tree. He had life insurance before, but he stopped paying the policy months ago. I am in contact with the police about the credit cards in our names and the other things that were discovered. All in all, things are looking really bleak at the moment, but I have faith that eventually it will work out. I have a few leads on jobs and have picked up a little temp work here and there the last few weeks so that we have something coming in. I have signed up for food stamps and Medicaid, so once that goes through, it will be a bit of help. I applied for AMHA as well, but they said the wait list can be a few years wait, so that is a kind of long shot. Someone has suggested asking family friends for help or loans, and they absolutely would help me if they could, but none of them are in a financial position to be able to help. My sister will hopefully be able to let us stay with her temporarily until I can sort things out and get us back together. She is my only living family and has been my rock through all this. So yeah, I guess that's it. Thank you all again for listening and helping. If anyone else has any more suggestions on trying to pick up the pieces that I haven't thought of, I would appreciate any advice. Update 2. This will probably be my last update, I hope at least. First of all, sorting things out didn't take nearly as long as we thought it would. things ended up being a lot more straightforward than they first appeared. I will be filing for bankruptcy, probably early next year. I've talked extensively with the lawyer and weighed my options, and that seems like the best way to move forward at this point. 90%, 95% of the debt should be discharged with bankruptcy, so that is a good thing, although it's bittersweet. We are losing the house. We will be moving out by November 30th. I am worried about the bankruptcy credit issues with trying to rent an apartment. However, I am now on the list for PMHA, and from what I've heard, the wait isn't long at all. We ended up not being able to count on staying with my sister for longer than about a week thanks to her jerky landlord, so I am trying to find something else in the meantime. I have a few options to look into. Honestly, I'm not that sad about the fact that we have to move out of the house. The old place is filled with tainted memories now, and I think it will be good to get a fresh start. I've been assured by the police and my lawyer that, because of the criminal nature of opening the accounts in the kids' names, we should be able to get their credit cleared. That one might be a long road, but we'll get through that too. My applications for Medicaid and food stamps came through, so that is some definite stress off my shoulders. I made the girls and myself an appointment at a family counselor, which we will be going to next week. The lady at PMIA Housing was very reassuring and very sweet about my situation, and she made it sound like I was pretty much a shoo-in as soon as a place opened up. Last but not least, I listened to the many Redditors that told me to make a post over in to inquire about help with Christmas for the girls. So hopefully we will be able to find some holiday help, and that will be another huge load of stress lifted off my shoulders. I want to thank everyone who messaged me and offered words of encouragement and support. I can't even begin to tell you how much it means to me to know that I'm not alone. I never imagined Reddit to be an empathetic and caring source of comfort, but it turns out that is exactly what it is. Thanks again, everyone. Final update. Hello, everyone. I wanted to give one last update to my situation since so many of you reached out to me. This has been a whirlwind few weeks. A lot of change, a lot of stress, and a lot of hard work. As difficult as all this has been and will still be to go through, I am feeling more positive than I have in months. The legal issues are being dealt with as best they can for the moment, and we are looking at filing bankruptcy early next year. It is scary to think about, but I do know it is our best option and things will work out in the end. We moved out of our house almost a week ago. It feels very bittersweet, and the girls are having a difficult time, but I know they will adjust, and I really do think a fresh start will be the best thing for us. The girls are in individual grief counseling, and we began family therapy. I will be making an appointment for myself as well, something so many of you encouraged me to do. Some of my good news now. We were able to find a permanent place to live, with a very sweet landlord who is sympathetic to my situation and has previous experience with the welfare system, and has bent over backwards to help me through all of the red tape. We will be moving, again, into the new place at the end of this month. Hopefully that will be the last time we have to move for a very long time. My second huge piece of good news to update with is that I got a job. I am now working full-time in an office of a company that is owned by someone I met through my posts here. She contacted me after my last update and offered me a trial run with her company. I started this past Monday and so far, so good. I am incredibly humbled and grateful to her for giving me a chance. That brings me to my third point and really the reason I am making this update. I wasn't sure what to expect when I first reached out for advice here. I just felt so overwhelmed with the situation, and I think I was just mostly wanting to not feel alone, and to connect with and talk to people who had some understanding of what I was dealing with. The response I got from all of you has been astonishing. The advice, the stories of dealing with similar circumstances, the encouraging messages, the fact that you all literally saved Christmas for me and my kids, a new frickin' job. And just the empathy and kindness you all have shown to me and my family is so far beyond anything I expected that I don't even know the words to express how grateful and humbled and loved it has made me feel. It is going to be a long, tough road, but I have total faith that things will be okay, and that is in large part due to the community. So in closing, I want to say thank you to every single person who reached out to me in any way, shape, or form. Thank you for lifting us up and helping us through this. You guys have saved me in a million different ways, and I will always be grateful. I hope you all have the merriest Christmas ever. Now, for the next story. Am I the idiot for refusing to care for my niece after she called Maine a hurtful slur and crossed the line? I, 29 male, and my wife, 30 female, have 2 kids, 5 male, 3 male. My wife works a full-time office job, while I work from home with extremely flexible hours. Basically, as long as I meet my deadlines, no one really cares how many hours it took or what time of day I work outside of some Zoom meetings. My sister, 26 female, let's call her Barb, and her husband, 30 male, let's call him Nick, live nearby and work full-time jobs. They have a daughter, 5 female, let's call her Tracy. Because of my comfortable work schedule, When our kids started going to daycare, we basically decided that I'll be dropping off and picking up my niece from daycare alongside my own kids. I didn't really mind, and I thought it was great for my kids to spend time with their cousin. I get along with Tracy as well, and always thought I was her cool uncle. She's a sweet kid and usually well behaved. So anyway, most days I bring her and my kids back to our house. I make them snacks or dinner, and in the evening my sister comes to pick them up. A few days ago, the 5-yo kids were watching Bluey on the TV as I was preparing snacks with my 3-yo, and I suddenly heard yelling. I rushed over to see what's up, and my son was yelling at her that my dad's not a girl, while my niece yells back he is. He's AFT. That's like a girl. The word is different in my language, but the meaning holds, as is the distinction between using it vs. simply addressing a gay person. I'm kind of in shock at first. But I turned off the TV, and I sat her down and began explaining that this is a very bad word, and we shouldn't be calling people that. And that regardless, I'm not a girl. And because this is a bad word, she should apologize to me, because we don't act mean to each other in this family, and if I hear this again, I'm going to talk to her parents, and she's going to get in trouble. She said she won't get in trouble because that's what her dad called me and he's not in trouble. I was stunned. I told her that regardless of what her dad said, it's a very bad word and she's not to use it with me, or in my presence, and that she should apologize regardless because it hurt my feelings, which she did, because she's a really good kid. We talked some more and I prodded her about other things her parents said. And from what I gather, getting info out of a 5-year-old being obviously a difficult and unreliable process, Nick, my bell, told my sister in Tracy's presence that men shouldn't be sitting at home all day and doing childcare. That cooking is a woman's duty, as is cleaning and really most of the things I do around my house. And that I'm a girl, I interpret this as not really a man, because I do housework and my wife earns more money than me. I explained to her the best I could that men and women could work from an office or from home, and that my wife or Barb working long hours from the office doesn't make them men, and vice versa. But I didn't dwell on it with her since it's not really her fault. I didn't immediately bring it up with my sister because I figured it would be a difficult conversation, and I didn't want to have it in front of the kids, and I wanted to talk it out with my wife first as well. I did talk to my wife that evening and she seemed really upset as well. I told her that I think I should demand an apology from Nick and my sister, and she agreed. I called my sister and told her what happened, and she said that it's just a word and I'm blowing it out of proportion, and obviously Nick doesn't dislike me. I said I don't care whether he does or doesn't dislike me. He is talking shit about me behind my back to my niece and to her. And she is apparently very chill about this, rather than standing up for me. She said that was how Nick was, and I should stop being a drama queen. The first told her to fuck off, and if that was how she felt she could pick up her own child from daycare, and hung up. I know it was really short notice and rude, but I really felt like I was being disrespected by people I did so much for over the years, and were my family. My wife said she understood, and that I shouldn't back down until I at least get a proper apology. The next 2 days were a weekend and there was no daycare. I assumed there would be calls or texts from Barb, but there was nothing. In fact, the suspicious lack of any messages or calls made me think she didn't take my words seriously, and this actually got me even more angry. The calls did come when it was time to pick up Tracy for daycare, and I obviously didn't come. I dropped my own kids off and didn't even answer for a while. I know it was petty, but I was stewing for 2 days and figured letting Barb stew for a few hours seemed really appropriate and felt really good. Around noon when she called again, I did pick up. I was going to smugly tell her that I was ready for my apology, and we would put it behind us, but I didn't get to. Instead, she went off on me, about how I was irresponsible and I flaked, and she was so late for work because of me, to which I just said I told you I wasn't going to pick her up. You had 2 days to make arrangements. And she kept yelling at me, so I hung up again. She kept calling and sending me texts about picking Tracy up from daycare, to which I said I will not be, then stopped replying. When I came to pick my kids up, Tracy was expecting me to take her as well, and I didn't, which was very rough on me and her both. Like, I know it's not her fault and she's 5, and she suddenly doesn't get to go over to our place and play and have snacks, but at the same time I didn't want to just let this thing go. I felt like I deserved an apology and still do, so I explained that me and her mom were fighting, but I'll pick her up again when we work it out. She obviously didn't take it well, because she's 5, but I apologized, took my kids and left. Well, a bit later I got a call from my mom. Barb roped her into picking up Tracy, but my mom is disabled, so she was having a really hard time with Tracy, and asked me why I was being mean to Barb. I told her everything, expecting her to take my side, but instead she also pulled a "you know how Nick is," to which I replied that the more I realize how Nick is, the less I like it, and if he thinks all this shit in general, and about me specifically. I sure as fuck ain't going to be doing free labor for him. She said I was blowing this all out of proportion. And I told her I wasn't the one doing it. Because all I asked for was a fucking apology. And everyone else seemed to prefer all of this shit to just giving it to me. To which she said I should just be the bigger man and not let it get to me. To which I said I was done and to have fun with Tracy. That evening I got a call from Nick himself, which I was hesitant about, but chose to answer on the off chance that I was actually about to get that apology. Nope. Apparently my behavior is causing Barb great distress, and we're family, and how can I do this to my own sister? I told him that since we're family, how can he talk shit about me to his kid, which I take care of daily, and he said he was only joking, and it was all in good fun. I told him it was neither good nor fun for me, and I want my apology. He blew up on me, telling me I was a FT and couldn't take a joke, and called me a hysterical little girl. I told him to fuck off, and that I was done with him, and hung up. This led to a bunch of calls from Barb, my mom, which I didn't answer. Barb texted me that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price for me being petty, and I told her that it wasn't fair for Tracy to pay the price of her parents being ungrateful pieces of shit. To which she just yelled at me a bunch about how she was going to lose her job and I was being cruel to her and to mom. I told her I was done, and unless her next message was an apology, I will be blocking her number. And it wasn't, so now I blocked her. Past few days my mom's been picking up Tracy, and it's been really rough seeing her in daycare and explaining that grandma's going to pick her up, which she hates, and tells me she isn't having fun with grandma and wants to come over to our place, and it's breaking my heart. But at the same time I never got a single apology from anyone but the 5-yo. And I feel like letting this go would just be telling my family that it's okay to ignore my boundaries. But at the same time I do love my niece, and I don't want to traumatize her, or have her resent me. She is a good kid and none of it is her fault. So, Ada? And what do I do? Edit. Holy shit, you guys. Post barely been up 4 hours and I am already so grateful for all your support and advice. The angle of Nick actually wanting Barb to quit her job is not one I considered, but now I think it might actually have merit, and it makes me very worried for her. At the same time I can't really do much until she at least acknowledges that that's just how Nick is, so stop overreacting isn't going to fly with me. I also assume it's only a matter of time until my mom is no longer an option. She's already having a hard time, so I hope I get a chance to talk to her about it, ideally because she sees my point of view. But I'll settle for it because she's desperate. I don't know what sort of child care they'll be able to afford. They took out a large mortgage on a house they can barely afford. I will also make certain to stress upon Tracy that I love her and none of this is her fault. Thank you all. Comments. Comment 1. Why is it always the shittiest, weakest, most pathetic men that talk about being manly and macho? Do they genuinely not understand how sexy and manly it is for a man to be a good cook, a hands-on dad, and a woman's biggest cheerleader? That shit gets you laid 1,000,000 times more, I swear. Comment 2. Christ. There's biting the hand that feeds, and then there's whatever the fuck this was. Nick is somehow worse than being just a piece of shit, as he's also a complete fucking idiot. Edit. I've decided to coin the phrase "don't put a live grenade in the hand that feeds" to describe this situation. Update. My dad died from a heart attack 2 years ago, which came as no surprise because he smoked a lot and lived a pretty unhealthy life, so we weren't really surprised it wasn't his first either. He was a great grandpa and a great dad before that, and right up to the end. But his death left my mom alone and she doesn't work. My mom has MS, which is basically mostly steady, but slowly gets worse over time and flares up occasionally, and is made worse by stress, which my mom goes through now. A flare-up often means the level she gets back to isn't quite what it was before, so we mostly try to keep her stress-free. My dad had life insurance, so her house is paid for, and she had a little money, but there's also a caretaker coming over 3 times a week to clean, cook, do shopping etc., which she can't afford, so me and my wife pay for. As I mentioned in a comment on the original post, me and my wife are doing probably better off financially than Barb Bill. They have a fancy house and fancy cars, but they have a mortgage and loans. So, the great response I got made me think about this shit again, and I thought how I could stand my ground without giving up on Tracy altogether, and figured there was no perfect solution, and I had to settle on something. I took the day off work because I just needed to process and deal with this shit. One comment on the original post really got to me about how someone would feel in Tracy's place, and I just can't do it to her now. I know this isn't the update some of you have wanted, but I just can't. I love her like she was one of my own, and my kids do as well, and it's not her fault. I unblocked my sister because obviously if I'm going to be interacting with her child, she needs to be able to reach me. I talked to my mom during the day and she was again distraught about having to pick Tracy up, which is pretty hard on her. I told her I was willing to do it, but I'm coming over and she's going to have to hear me out, to which she agreed. I talked to her for a long time, avoiding snark and lashing out this time, and just explaining that basically how serious Nick was, or how he is, doesn't matter. I used that rocking the boat analogy someone linked to in comments, and further stressed my point by saying that it shouldn't matter if I was justified or not in getting upset. I am her child, and if something upset me, it at least warrants giving me the benefit of the doubt before siding against me. And eventually it seemed to come through. She apologized and we hugged it out, and I think she got it. She's not a very confrontational person and generally really tries to keep the peace, and this time she went about it wrong. I'm not saying I'm not mad, but she's my mom and she apologized. I explained to her that she shouldn't be covering for me because that means I have no leg to stand on when confronting Nick and Barb, and she was receptive to it. I texted my sister that we needed to talk and I'll drop Tracy off at their place tonight, to which I got a stoic thumbs up. I picked Tracy up from daycare today and she was overjoyed. She was actually a little possessive of me, staying by my side all afternoon instead of running off to play, which was cute but also made me feel like shit a little, because that's impact me not picking her up. I explained to the best of my ability that she's not in trouble and I'm not angry with her. But I am angry with her parents and we need to work that out. But I'll do my best to not stop picking her up anymore, which she was really happy about. I dropped her off in the evening, and once she was in bed I sat down to talk with Barb and Nick. I told them flat out that Mom wasn't going to be covering for them anymore, and if they didn't let me finish what I had to say, I would get up and leave, and they can find new arrangements for Tracy. Didn't mean it, but they don't need to know that. They weren't happy but they were willing to listen. So that's progress. Or at least the threat working. I explained that this was the situation now. I don't need them to mean their apology. But I sure as fuck was going to need one. This was principle now. I have spent years taking care of their child, and if they wanted to be assholes I wasn't going to do it for free. So this was how it goes now. I am no longer going to be dropping her off in the morning until further notice. There was no excuse for the way Nick acted, and it needed to have some lasting impact. I was no longer going to be paying for family outings and family vacations. It was a man's job to support his family, so good luck with that. The exception is Tracy, who is always welcome. If I hear any more BS being talked about me behind my back, I was going to start charging them for my service. My plan was to dangle the thing they want: childcare. Restoring it, but at the same time giving some repercussions and threat of things getting hard for them again. I also laid it on pretty thick about how I am a man, so I obviously have my pride, and can't have that be disrespected, even by my own family, who I obviously love. Don't really consider Nick family, but figured he wouldn't figure that out. Nick was not happy about this, and my sister actually had to take him outside to talk it out without me, but eventually they did agree to it, and I got my admittedly half-hearted apology. I could probably press it further, but I didn't want to risk having to either back down or hurt Tracy again, so I took this. There were no tears and no warm hugs. But I get to walk away with what I wanted, giving them some payback without having to give up my time with Tracy. I still plan to talk to my sister alone about her relationship with Nick, and about how she sees me. But I figure I should let things calm down a bit before I do. I know this isn't the resolution some maybe most of you wanted, but at the end of the day I need to find a solution I can live with, and for me this is it. We'll update if anything changes. Now, for the next story. My coworker asked Maine to be her man of honor, and when I said no, she went ballistic. Did I miss something or overreact? A few minutes later Claire found me and asked how my vacation was. I was telling them about it, and she cut me off and said she had a very important question to ask. She handed a little gift bag, and asked if I would be her best man of honor for her wedding. I thanked her and told her that typically this would traditionally go to a close female relationship. She responded that there was nothing traditional about her wedding, so it was good. I looked over at Laura and Kim, who were both trying to keep from laughing. I again thanked her, congratulated her, and told her that I wasn't interested in being part of her wedding party, and that I would be happier being a guest in the audience. I swear when I said this it was when we watched her entire demeanor changed and a switch flipped. She went off saying that I have to be in her wedding, and that she doesn't understand why I would say no. I told her that we only knew each other for a short time, and that I had no interest in trying to plan parties, dinners, and shopping trips. She told me I needed to think about it and she would get back to me later. I told her go for it, but my answer will be the same. She walked away and I looked at Kim and Laura, and asked what the ever-loving fresh creepy hell was that. Kim started to laugh and said she didn't know. But saying no like I did might have saved me a lot of headaches in the future. Laura made the comment that she went straight to Bridezilla, and this was a look into what she was going to be like. Claire came back today, however she went with a different approach and handed me a list of what she wants me to do and her vision of how she sees things. I asked her why she gave me this, and she said that as her man of honor these were my responsibilities. I told her again that I was not going to do any of this. She started again that she needs me to do this, and how much fun it was going to be, then she asked, haven't you ever wanted to be part of something special? I told her I was. I was a nurse. Enter Kim, who could sense that I needed help and told Claire one of her patients needed her help. I told Kim that if this keeps up I might need her help. She said she was already watching it, and would intervene if I needed it. What did I miss? We aren't that close. She just transferred down to my unit from a different unit 6 months ago. I had no idea who she was until that point. Laura is saying that she is close in age to me and she might feel that to be enough of a connection. Did I miss something? When we are asked, are we supposed to automatically gush and jump up and down in excitement? Why is saying no a bad thing? Comments. Comment 1. The inappropriate reason to use a huge needle like that is that the bigger the needle, the more it hurts. The implication is that the nurse chose that size in order to make the procedure as painful as possible for the patient. Comment 2. A 14G needle is used for cartilage piercings. Standard earlobe piercings are smaller, like 16G or 18G. It's insane to use a needle that large for any kind of blood work. Also, piercings needles are not the same as medical needles. A piercing needle has a different styled bevel tip that is meant to stretch the flesh apart and leave a clean opening for a piercing. Medical needles are still beveled but more blunt. I cannot emphasize enough how absolutely excruciating it would be to use a huge-ass needle like that for blood work. Fuck that lady, I'm glad she got fired. Update 1. First, I apologize. I never thought this was going to go as crazy as it did. I want all of you to know I read all of your responses and responded to as many as I was able to. Thank you all for your amazing insights and comments. Many that made me laugh. Which I needed. I have been sick and that really helped to cheer me up. I had to meet with my lawyer today regarding family issues. Editor's note: Oop goes into detail about those issues in other posts on his profile, but they weren't relevant here, so I didn't include them. My neighbor, best friend, coworker Laura took me. I really felt awful and driving wasn't a good idea. We were talking about this on the way and we both were asking a lot of the same questions that all you were asking. The big one was that we were asking about the circumstances of her transfer. She went from Med-Surg 4W to the ER. That is a huge change. I have to work tomorrow, so we will see what happens. But Laura and I are going to ask Kim about the transfer and raise a couple of other concerns. After I got home from the meeting with my lawyer, I slept for the rest of the day. Many of you asked about if Claire and I hang out outside of work. The answer is no. I really don't know anything about her. I have helped her a few times with patients and different things. But our relationship is 100% purely work-related. That was why I was so surprised that she asked me to do this. That is why I was so surprised that she asked me about being the man of honor. I have a very small friend base, and in all honesty, I like to keep it that way. I really have no interest in being a part of this. I'm not a wedding person. After reading so many Bridezilla stories and hearing about over-the-top weddings, they have become a huge turn-off to me, spending tens of thousands to hundreds of thousands of dollars with insane, unrealistic demands that turn people against each other. Why? I would rather use that money and spend that time planning my next trip or vacation. Many people said that I was being used as a token or prop in a wedding, or a gay best friend. I never really thought about it. I admit that I'm out and proud. But I'm not going to just pretend to be someone's friend just so they can fulfill some kind of fetish they have for wanting to have a gay best friend or some kind of status she feels the need to fulfill. It takes me a lot to get offended, but if this were actually the case, then I would really be rather offended. I was not put on the face of the earth to be someone's play toy. A lot of people have said that maybe she doesn't have a boyfriend. She does. She has brought him in before. If she has any insecurity, I don't understand it. She is attractive, smart, and knows his stuff. So I'm at a loss as to why she is acting like this. A lot of people say go to HR. I'm starting that process with my boss, Kim. She is completely aware of the situation, being with us when all this happened. She has told me that she is watching the situation and will jump in if I need her to. I trust her completely. While Kim and HR can control the situation from the hospital, they can't control the situation from a personal level if she were to maybe follow me home or a situation like that. So I think that covers it all. I wish I could say this is over, but most likely there is more to come. Update 2. I was born into a family where I was referred to as an issue that needed to be dealt with. I lived in the shadows of my sister, who was the child my parents wanted. They wanted one child, which was a girl. That way Dad had his daddy girl and Mom had mommy little princess. Then I came along. Keep in mind that I'm 23, so back then my parents had options but chose to not use any of those options. So instead my parents raised my sister and I was raised by a nanny who even to this day is one of the biggest influences in my life, and I am so grateful for her. She helped me with so much. I finally realized that all these years later that by being referred to as an issue that needed to be dealt with, that they stripped me of my humanity and individuality and self-worth as a person. I think that's why I have worked so hard to establish myself in my career and in my life. As a way to become a person again. And not just be that issue that needed to be dealt with. This past Thursday things came to a head with the bridezilla known as Claire, and the truth came out. My best friend Laura has been sticking close to me when we worked together if Claire was to start something. We weren't sure if she was going to leave it alone or start up again. I was really hoping that it was done. But she had to try once again. I've been sick and I had a busy morning, so I really just wanted a few minutes to go to the bathroom. Grab a quick snack and maybe breath? Claire came up and had her list and asked if I had a few minutes to talk about the wedding planning. I looked at her and told her again no, that I was not interested in being part of her wedding, and that I was not going to help in any way, and she needed to drop the subject and leave me alone. Again, she went into the who thing of how I was going to do this and how much fun it was going to be. Here we go with that line all of you loved the first time. Why in the ever-loving fresh creepy hell is it so important for me to be your man of honor? I'm not interested, and I'm not doing it. It is as exactly as pretty much all of you told me it would be. She was just planning on using me as a token or a play toy. She took all of the fucked up gay stereotypes that are out in society and put them into one sentence. What modern liberal woman isn't going to have a gay bestie on her arm for special events? I felt everything in my stomach move, and a wave of nausea come over me, and I felt like I couldn't get to the bathroom fast enough. This pissed Laura off to no end. Laura is really kinda like the overprotective sister that I wish I would have had, and took Claire off to visit our boss Kim and laid it all out. Everything that was said. While I wasn't in on that conversation, Laura and Kim filled me in on what was said. Kim came to check on me and I was still hiding in the bathroom. She knocked on the door and asked if she could come in. I asked her for a bottle of water first. While I was waiting, I realized two things. I realized why I chose to not hang out with her, and why I didn't like her. I couldn't figure out why I didn't like her, just that there was something that gave me. But I realized that I didn't like her because she is a different version of my sister. While Claire is educated and employed, she doesn't care about other people and their feelings. She is like my sister in the sense that if she wants something bad enough, she will figure out how to get it. The second thing I realized was that she did exactly what my parents did to me. She completely dehumanized me and reduced me to an entity. Just kinda turned me into a token or a thing for her. I think the word that best describes it is, I'm just a play toy. What really gets me is that just like my sister Claire doesn't think she did anything wrong and I'm being too sensitive and a delicate snowflake. The next day an emergency meeting was held at work and Claire is being suspended pending investigation, and a new transfer is being looked into. Kim made the request for her to be terminated. The director of emergency nursing said this was a last resort, but she was going to be looking into options which could be sending her to a new hospital or a facility. This didn't go over well with me. I asked what would happen if she did the exact same thing to someone different. She didn't really give me an answer. But she said she still needs to look into a few things, and at this point she is suspended. Anyway. Here it is. I'm still pretty sick and had to work this weekend. If I can, I'll respond. I want to thank everyone for all the amazing support. I'm going back to my lawyer to see if he can figure out how to send her a cease and desist letter to make sure she doesn't contact me. I'm heading to bed. Have a good night. Edit. I keep forgetting to thank my boyfriend. He has been with me on this, but more in the background. First when we were laughing about it. But when everything Thursday happened, he was there as well. Elle was able to get him away from his unit for a little bit for the it will be okay boyfriend hug. He stayed the night with me a couple of nights as well, also helping with me being sick. So yeah. I'm very lucky to have such a great support. New update. Hi everyone. Meow. First, I apologize for not responding sooner. I have always tried to do what I can to stay engaged with all of you and to respond as often as possible. Truth of the matter is that I hit a brick wall. Between everything with my parents being sick and then the bridezilla, I just kinda lost all my motivation to keep the conversation going. But I will say this. I read all of your comments, every one of them, and there are not enough words in any language to say thank you for all the amazing support, feedback and suggestions. I am truly grateful for everything all of you brought to the table. I went back to my lawyer the other day and told him everything. I told him I only had her name but I did not have her address, and since he has resources that I don't, I wanted him to find her and send her a cease and desist letter to not contact me. He was looking into this. The good news. Claire has been terminated. While I am not able to talk about all of the details, I can say that this goes a lot deeper than what she did to me, and after Kim did some digging, it brought out some information that could have put our hospital in a serious position. When this information was brought out in the open, it gave the director of emergency nursing den no choice but to terminate her, and it could put the den in a serious position as well. Honestly, it has Kim, Laura and myself potentially looking for new jobs if this doesn't get properly corrected. None of us want to change hospitals, because then we have to start all over with seniority and benefits. It's a last resort, but it's still something to consider. I guess I can say that this is closed. At least I hope it is. I need to move on with my life. I doubt that Claire will be dumb enough to contact me. She is in enough trouble, and this would only make it worse. Again, I apologize for not being able to keep up with responding back to all of your comments, but again, I can assure you that I read all of them and value all of them as well. Now, for the next story. My boyfriend's optimism and immaturity nearly ruined me financially. I cut him off, and now he feels abandoned. My boyfriend and I started dating in July of 2014. He is the biggest optimist in the world and lived a pretty cushy life as the only child of divorced parents. We both lived separately and had jobs that covered all our bills, and then some. He bought an expensive sports car, gaming computer, and purebred dog, important later. He was in school, while I had graduated a year before and started work at my first big kid job. Life was great, and the first 6 months were some of the happiest times of my life. The first week of January 2015, he was wrongfully terminated from his job. A new supervisor was on the warpath to replace everyone on BF's shift with his friends, and waited until the new year, after the holiday rush was over, to start cleaning house. Government sided with BF during the unemployment claim, and BF started receiving benefits. He decided to focus on finishing school instead of looking for more work. This where the cracks started. He was supposed to graduate that May, but he failed a class and couldn't, so he had to go to school in the summer. In June, his savings ran out and he could either afford his car payment and insurance or rent. His lease was up at the end of July, so I agreed to pay his rent and he could move in with me in July and finish school. He found out weeks before he was supposed to graduate that he needed one particular elective to get out. He had to go to school that fall too. I demanded he get a job to help with expenses, as I wasn't planning on having to support him for so long. A month or two, fine. 6 months? No. He got a job as an insurance agent for an extremely reputable company at the end of July. Turns out this job is commission-based. Being the optimist he is, the manager's talk of being able to make unlimited amounts of money drew him in. I paid for him to take the certification tests he needed to work, and he started trying to build a client base selling structured financial products. He made and makes nothing. He'll have a $700 payday for a small close, then nothing for months. He's out there busting his ass every day. But building a financial client base from scratch without any family privilege or existing networks is ridiculously hard. In Sept 2015, we downsized from my fancy downtown apartment to a PO's house on the edge of the ghetto. I paid the security deposit and double rent at both places for a month, as that's how the lease overlaps worked out, totaling about $3,500. By November, my savings was almost gone and I had to liquidate shares of my family trust, on which I took a penalty, as my grandfather did not want us to access it before age 25 to get us by. By DC, I had $300 in savings and nothing left in my family trust. I had spent about $17,000 since July supporting us. His job, he needed money to take clients out for lunch and coffee, his dog and my dog. Since September, we had been having recurring fights about money and chores. I expected him to pick up 90% of the housework as his way of paying me back. He never shaped up on either front. He just kept repeating to me the same things that his manager said to him to draw him in. It'll get better. Everyone struggles at first. If you hang on, you'll make it. Once I make it, we'll be rolling in it. Every time we had a fight. Every time. 2 weeks before Christmas, we had this fight again and I demanded he do something other than feed me bullshit inspirational quotes. I left the house in a rage and drove to buy cigarettes. I was thinking of who I should text and ask to crash for the night when I got angry. Fuck no. I'm not crashing on someone's couch while he lives on the house I pay for, sleeps in the bed I pay for, and eats the food I pay for. I returned home and gave him 10 days to pack his shit and get out. He moved into his dad's house, and I spent Christmas morning chilling with my dog and returning his presents online. We started hanging out again in January of this year, and things seemed to be going well for his business, enough for him to consider getting an apartment. I told him he could move back in, and if we couldn't split expenses evenly at first, he had to get serious about doing chores and sticking to my budget. It was fine at first, but by April he wasn't doing any chores and I was back to paying 100% of his and his dog's living expenses. He also was about to not meet quota for that quarter and asked me to sign up for a policy and then reverse it after quarter end, so I'd be reimbursed. I lost my shit on him. I work in capital markets, I can't afford to commit financial fraud for him. I told him I've sacrificed enough for him, he can't come for my integrity too. Bonus, the friend who he did rope into doing the reverse policy still hasn't been reimbursed, 5 months later. We had another blowout fight, and he majorly stepped up on the chores front, which has sustained to this day. Money was still touch and go when he didn't get paid, his fancy car ate it up every month. He landed a big case in May, and paid his half rent in June for the first time, and offered to pay all of July, which he did. By the second week of July he was completely broke again, and told me last minute he couldn't pay August rent. I had to scramble to get the cash needed in one account to send the check. He couldn't afford to pay for his half of groceries like he promised either, so that was a scramble too. I'm so sick of this. I work an incredible job for my age, paid off all my college debt 8 months after graduation, and own my car, yet I'm living paycheck to paycheck supporting him. There's always something, even if it's a legitimate something, that keeps him from paying his half. It's been a fucking year and there hasn't even been marginal improvement. His job is meant for filthy rich trust fund kids who can afford to be this broke while they build their client base. I admire his optimism, but he's not suffering for listening to it. I am. I have enabled him far too long, and after the most recent fight about money, I realized he is too immature to be trying his hand at this job. He complains when he meets with clients that spend their money on cars and trips and toys instead of buying a policy from him, when he blew his money on a car and a gaming PC when he had a steady paying job. He has no problem having regular, circular fights with me, yet won't ask his parents for help because that would be awkward, and I don't want to lose his father's respect. He's hurt that I don't trust his promises when he's barely kept any of them, from his graduation date to his bills to chores. He is too immature to see the larger picture, and because I've been enabling him to a fault, he has never needed to, because the consequences don't fall on him. They fall on me. Last night I told him I'm not renewing the lease and am moving out by myself. He followed me around the house pleading with me and asking me questions. How do you feel about me? What about us? Where will I go? What will it take for you to let me come with you? Questions I have answered every single fight. Questions he needs to answer because it's his fucking life. I refused to answer them again and went to bed. He stood in the doorway and said that stupid Marilyn Monroe quote about not deserving people at their best if you can't handle them at your worst. I said he was totally allowed to feel that way and walk. He shut himself in the computer room and slept on the couch that night. I can't believe he feels like I'm abandoning him after all I've done. He doesn't understand how hurtful it is when he tries to pay his half of rent and bills by spouting off platitudes about struggle and success. It makes me feel so fucking disrespected, and I have told him this every fight. And despite having this fight regularly, it's like he's not even listening to me. Why would he? I haven't made myself worthy of respect by being his financial doormat and not sticking to my boundaries. At this point I feel he is using me as a safety net. He knows I won't let him or his dog starve, so he doesn't make himself care about coming up with the money for food. He is deluded by his optimism so much so that he breaks every optimistic promise he makes to me. He talks about how he thinks a client will buy an expensive plan, but then they get the cheap one, and now he can't pay rent. He talks about how he met loads of people at a networking event, but only 3 call him back and he needs money to take them out. He says he's set to get 40% enrollment on a corporate contract, but only gets 11% so he can't pay for groceries this week. I used to think he was lying to me, but now I see he's lying to himself. He hasn't matured at all and grounded his expectations in reality because I've been standing in the way of it. Because of this, I don't trust him to give me a realistic end date to supporting him, because he'll probably be wrong about that too. And now that I'm done being his atlas and holding his world together, he's starting to panic. It bothers me so fucking much that he didn't take me seriously until I let the hammer drop on him, as it should have been in the beginning. The irony is not lost on me that he's a broke financial advisor. I missed the first 6 months of this relationship, when he had a job that paid well enough to cover up his financial immaturity. I could have taught him a few things that might have stuck instead of picking up all the slack and mumming the ever-living out of him. I miss going to sit-down dinners and football games and movies with him. I miss the feeling I had a month after I met him, where I knew I would marry him. Now I'm not sure at all. I'm sad I love him. It's a burdensome tether, instead of the inner flame it used to be. And maybe this is my own fatal optimism speaking. But that guy is still there. Buried underneath all this bullshit. He just has to grow the fuck out of it, and take his own risks to learn his own lessons. I can't even explain how badly I want the guy I met back. I'm tearing up writing this. I agreed to him moving back in this year because according to him he only needed a few more months to make it, and be stable, and I wanted that for him so badly so we could go back to enjoying life together. My hope is hamstringing me just like it's doing to him. Can our relationship survive now that I'm seriously taking steps to ensure it doesn't bankrupt me? Or am I being stupid and thinking anything will change? Will he move in with his dad and just get him to be the new enabler? What am I doing wrong that's preventing him from understanding how I feel? Comments. Comment 1. This is the post my mom would have written in 1996. My dad was just like that. He tried selling life insurance and financial planning services and cars and a whole series of MLM shit. He secretly rented an office and bought an expensive computer and put it all on credit in secret. They went bankrupt. My mom was a fool for not divorcing him. After the bankruptcy and threat of divorce he changed in that he kept working normal wage-based jobs. He hated that work and resented my mom for making him do it. As if it were punishment and not just what an adult with 2 kids and a mortgage has to do. They are still together and he's been working the same job he hates for almost 20 years now. They both still resent each other, and I don't even really know why they are together. Maybe just fear of loneliness. Anyway, I'm glad Oop got rid of that guy before he could introduce any more chaos into her life. Comment 2. I have a friend in a similar situation. It's impressive how people are blind in these situations. This friend of mine's BF is an entrepreneur who sells almost nothing per month. Still, he frequently goes on business trips. WTF? I always think, how can't she see her so is ruining her life? I'm honestly afraid one day my friend will wake up older, with almost no money, feeling that she lost her whole life investing in a relationship where the other did nothing real to make them grow up together. I also can't understand how my friend can't see that. Based on her own words to me, her so suspiciously made her lose money so many times. And some situations are so weird. They looked like she was scammed by her so. But she can't see these. And I'm afraid to lose the friendship if I tell her more than I already said. Update. After I made that post, I decided to truly cut him off. I changed the Wi-Fi password, froze the credit card I gave him, applied to close our joint accounts, and threw out any gifts I ever gave him. We were planning on attending a dork convention over Labor Day in Atlanta, for those familiar with the con scene that I had budgeted paying for both of us over a year ago. I told him he couldn't go unless he paid for his half of the hotel and tickets, $600. Not sure why I did this instead of shooting straight and admitting he was out of his gourd if he thought he could go. Shouldn't have played any games, but I'm kinda glad I did because he told me he'd have $1,000 to me by the end of August. Over text too, in writing. I was floored. Suddenly he can come up with money for a weekend of partying and a chance to reel me back in? I said I would apply that to August's bills. Then he could start paying down the rest of the $25,000 he owed me for supporting him this past year before he could spend his money on luxuries like out-of-state vacations. This was over text, and he never responded, and slept on the couch again that night. That was a Friday. Saturday morning, he left the house around 9 a.m. with his dog, leaving all of his crap in my house. I piled all of his and his dog's stuff under his desk and got rid of any pictures of him around the house. I blocked him everywhere but Facebook and text. I went to 2 rental house showings, loved one of them and the landlord, put a deposit down that day, went on multiple walks with my dog as well as a long trip to the dog park, and celebrated vented drank wine through Twizzlers with my next door neighbor and her boyfriend. Ex-BF never returned that night. Sunday I spent the day working on cosplays and outfits for the convention as well as goofing off with my neighbor and dog. It was lovely. I kept waiting for this wave of sadness and regret to hit me, but it never did. He had been out for 24 hours and his name wasn't on the lease. I texted him that his claim to residency was gone, and he needed to come get his things with 24 hours notice. He said he was coming that night. I said 24 hours notice. He agreed to Monday evening. Monday he picks up his stuff in his father's truck and gives me back the key. Hours after he left, he added a song to our shared YouTube playlist, Say Something by A Great Big World. I added Gravity by Sarah Bareilles and Too Good by Drake, then removed his access to the playlist the next morning. Yay, middle school communication methods. Wednesday his best friend texts me like nothing is wrong. Thursday I text my ex about when I can expect his check in the mail. He doesn't respond. Friday morning I email him. At this point, as far as I can tell, he's gone no contact with me. I send him one last email a day later basically stating that, and he asks me to coffee Sunday night. We met up for coffee. He never mentions repayment at all, but in the discussion about our feelings, we both felt the same way about this betrayed, abandoned, hurt, and distrustful of the other person. He felt I had lied when I said I was fine supporting him, and basically insinuated that I wouldn't want to be repaid if I believed in us, because otherwise I was actually loaning him money under the guise of love and setting him up to fail. When I realized he felt just as used as me because I cut him off from my money, I knew I was done. My stomach sank like a weight. I let him finish talking, then we parted ways. He asked if he could contact me. I said I needed a break. The next day I emailed him about the $1,000 he promised me, and reminded him he never discussed repayment at our meeting. He didn't respond for days. Then the day I was set to leave town for the convention, he replies saying the money was on the way. Cool, it can sit in my mailbox for 5 days while I'm out of state. Also, during this time he was telling mutual friends we were going through a rough patch, yet my friends were finding him on Tinder and OKC. I partied my tail off for the entire convention, and when I came back, the check was in a UN postmarked envelope in my mailbox. I cashed it, and sent him an email telling him such an ass that he used snail mail for future repayments, instead of trespassing on my property when he knows I won't be home. I seriously wonder if he was looking for the spare key I left with the dog sitter. So creepy. He replied to that email with some mushy "I love you and I know I fucked up" things, claiming he is too nice and can't say no, and his urge to help others makes him neglect himself and he needs to work on that. It was the most laughable apology on earth. I was so nice and helpful that I couldn't stop myself from draining you of all your money and energy. My bad. I replied, you broke my heart and my bank account. It will be a long time before they're both fixed, and by then I hope I won't be stupid enough to trust you with them a third time. I will be responding to emails about repayment, otherwise good luck with everything. He replied, if I could take everything back that I did, I would. I love you, name. With all my heart. I could have prevented it all. I could have taken action. But I let you slip away. And that'll be one of the biggest mistakes of my life. I'm truly, truly sorry for hurting you. I just want you to be happy. That's all I've ever wanted. I moved out of the house we lived in to a similar one a few streets away. Moving helped keep me busy enough to not think about this. I threw out all our mementos and pictures and shit in the process, so everything in the new place is all me. Just me. Now I'm settled in, and it feels like it hasn't hit me that it's over. I thought I would be crushed, and there were some lonely moments at the convention that caught me up enough to need a cigarette. But I just feel humiliated. I don't even have the urge to check his Instagram. Every time I see a picture of him, it just reminds me of how stupid and naive I am for thinking he was my one. I'm also super distrustful of my feelings now, because of that. It wasn't a question in my mind when I met him that we'd be together forever. I knew I wanted to spend my life with him, like my name, like a fact. I see cute people out, or have great conversations, but I have no desire for anything more because I feel like my feelings aren't trustworthy enough to merit acting on them. They led me so far astray last time. Now, for the next story. My boyfriend of 1 year is starting to gross me out. Am I overthinking it? Or is this a real issue? This is really awkward and embarrassing to share, but I can't think of anywhere else to get advice. I've been dating James for just over a year. We have a really good relationship and we are good with communicating any issues that we have come to. I am very much in love with him and we are happy. Now, maybe he is very comfortable with me now, which I know is a good thing, but I'm very frustrated, and I don't know if it's just me. This is the only issue I have with him. He's just constantly farting and burping and it's starting to really gross me out. It feels stupid to even type that. But it's really become excessive. We are both graduated from school and work full-time. We do not live together, but he is starting to move into my apartment. This started about 5 months into our relationship, and it has gotten progressively worse. He will burp constantly and blow it into my face, to a point where I will start dry heaving. Because he thinks it's funny. He does the same thing with farting, always trying to do it on me because he thinks it's hilarious. I know it's normal. I grew up with 4 brothers, but he is constantly forcing it to happen. This is not once or twice. We have spent almost every night together the past 6 months, and it will happen all night. All night. I have asked him to please stop because I find it really gross, especially the burping, because he will do it in my face, and it turns my stomach, and he will apologize but still continue to do it. Or lean in for a kiss and burp in my face instead. Then laugh himself to the point of tears when I act disgusted. I thought maybe at first he was just really gassy and I should be more understanding because it's a natural bodily function. He does not do this when we are out to dinner or with friends. A few months ago we went to a wedding together with some members of his family, and he accidentally burped really loudly like he normally does when he is alone with me, and our table went really silent and glared at him. I didn't want him to be embarrassed, so I high-fived him and said good one, and the whole table started laughing and cheering, and he pulled me aside and said he was thankful I did so, as he was humiliated, but I broke the ice. I was a bit drunk and frustrated, so I asked him why he does it to me constantly, but he wouldn't do it in front of other people. His reasoning is that I am his girlfriend, and he should be able to play around with me like that. That I was being a typical girl for finding it rude, uptight, high maintenance. I didn't want to argue about it, so I told him I was none of those things and he knew it. Cut the bullshit. We'll talk about it later when we're sober and just have a fun time at the party for now. And we did. But it never changes. I've tried to make plans to be out of the house when we see each other, because even though it seems ridiculous, it's starting to stress me out. I can't talk to any of my friends about it because they think it's so funny. He is a very sweet guy. I like spending time with him, but I feel nauseous when we are alone together, because it's just so gross. He is starting to work longer shifts, so he wants to stay in a lot most nights to relax. He started doing it during sex as a joke, and our sex life has really suffered because of it. A few nights ago he was texting me before he got off work, complaining about his day, and he seemed really stressed out, so I told him I would come over and I'll make his favorite, and I'll make him forget about it. So I went over to his house and started cooking until he was off. After dinner he leaned in to kiss me, and I turned my head because I'm so used to him burping in my face. We had an argument because he was accusing me of cheating. We haven't been having sex. I told him it was because of the burping, and he said I needed to get over it, that he was only joking and I was being such a prude, that his girlfriend shouldn't reject a kiss from him, yada yada. I told him that I've been saying this is a problem for a while. I don't think it's funny at all. I have thrown up because of it. He started to laugh as I said that, and I just kinda lost it. I don't really yell at people. I am a calm and collected person, so I scared him a bit. I told him it was disgusting and I am getting to the point where I'm no longer attracted to him, that I've been trying so hard to be understanding, but it's a two-way street. It wasn't to me about something being gross or funny anymore. It was about respect. He kind of got defensive, trying to throw in how I was overreacting, being ridiculous, but I shut it down and he apologized because he apparently didn't know I felt so strongly about it. He would try not to do it anymore at all. I don't care that it happens. I only care that he forces it, etc. Now, having talked it out for the next couple of hours, he actually didn't try to burp in my face or fart on me. I was so happy I could enjoy cuddling my boyfriend without trying not to vomit. So I started unzipping his pants to make him forget about his bad day. You already know where this is going. It's humiliating, but I'm going to type it out anyway. As I was trying to blow him, he pushed my head down so I couldn't get away and tensed up and started farting loudly, while laughing. I was so frustrated I started crying immediately. I think he realized he did something wrong, because he let go of my head and tried to hold me, and he kept saying, "I'm sorry. I thought you meant to do it less." I thought it was going to be funny, to break the tension from before. But I got up and left his apartment. That was 2 days ago. He has tried calling me, texting me constantly. I have not responded. His messages range from being very apologetic to very angry, back and forth. I don't know what to do and I feel like this relationship is over, but I still love him. I feel also really gross and violated in a way. Our mutual friends have been texting me as well, asking if everything is okay. And I've tried explaining the situation to my best friend, but he found it hilarious. So I'm afraid to explain it to anyone else. This is just so stupid. I literally feel like I'm crazy. Maybe I am uptight, etc. I also have a lot of his stuff over here that belongs to him and I'm worried he will come back to get it and I'll have to face him. What should I do? Am I just overreacting? Comments. Comment 1. If your man makes you scared or physically hurts on purpose or by accident, if it is ongoing or tells you your boundaries are unreasonable, he is trying to normalize his abuse. It starts off as pinches that bruise, too much tickling, and too hard butt slaps, but it will escalate to slaps and punches. The driving too fast is so that when you tell them they are scaring you, they can gaslighting you into believing that you are the unreasonable one, and then use that as a base to escalate. This is calculated. Oops X did not become violent out of nowhere. He had been physically, mentally, and emotionally abusing her almost since the beginning. It was a slow manipulation, so she acclimated to it. He lost it because he lost control of her. Comment 2. This is a very clear demonstration of how we are failing young women. This woman was being abused for a year and never even thought of it as abuse. We teach girls and women to put up with abuse in a million different ways, and then are surprised when a huge portion of them end up in abusive relationships. Update. Just want to clear a few things up before I get into how this is climaxed for me. My boyfriend did not start out doing this constantly. I remember the first time he did it, I was confused and told him right away I did not like it calmly, and he seemed to understand. I have never laughed when he did it purposely. I know the difference between an accident and what he does. A lot of the replies helped me examine my relationship as a whole. We have had other problems that seem to fit the same pattern. He had the same behavior with driving very fast for fun, and he had the same issue with playfully pinching and tickling, but he was doing it so hard it would leave bruises. I always expressed that I did not like this, but he was insistent that I was overreacting. When I showed him he was actually hurting me, he stopped completely, and never did it since. I didn't think it was an important thing to bring up. I think it's a bit harsh to call him abusive, because he respected that boundary. I know a lot of people were suggesting that I do the same thing to him, or retaliate in the same way, and it might sound nice to entertain that fantasy, but I'm really not like that. I will never let someone else's actions define who I am as a person. I know I will never try to intentionally hurt someone, and that makes me have faith in myself. A few of you made me really cry, because before I wrote my post I was completely unsupported and I felt alone and, well, really ridiculous and dumb. So thank you very much for taking the time to help me, even though I'm a stranger and none of you owe me anything, let alone your time and kindness. Thank you. Now on to today. I have not replied to any of James' messages. I blocked him on all devices. I feel like I basically told him it was over and he knew that. I have messaged a few of our mutual friends back saying that I would really appreciate it if they would just drop it. That everything is okay with me, but the relationship is over between us. A post said I didn't have to explain the situation completely, so I did that. They seemed very understanding, except one replied saying over a one-time incident. Get real LOL, but WE, so long as you're happy, it didn't really bother me, because I know the truth. It was hurtful that James may have lied, but I'd rather surround myself with people who value honesty. I also invited my best friend over and asked him if he could help me box all of James' belongings, to which he agreed right away. He kept asking me what happened, and if I was okay, so I showed him this post and he was disgusted. He apologized for laughing when I had tried to tell him earlier, because he said he didn't know it was so serious. He offered to take James' belongings to him, but I made him promise to not be hostile, or I'd ask someone else. He agreed. We spent a lot of the day in my apartment. When the front door opened, it's hard for me to articulate myself, but I'll try to type it exactly as it happened. We both heard it and stopped talking immediately. It was James. I'm not going to lie. I was immediately frightened, and maybe I could have handled it better, but I kind of just stood there. I just didn't expect to see him. He has never showed up at my home or work without a warning. My friend asked him what the fuck he thinks he was doing here. James kept staring at me and ignored him, saying, I thought you were dead or something. Why have you been ignoring me? My friend stepped in front of him and handed him one of the boxes and told him he could take his stuff and leave. That it was over, and I didn't want to talk to him. James laughed and made a move towards me and said I needed to talk to him alone. But my friend moved in front of him and told him that he shouldn't be in my house uninvited. That it was illegal and he was going to call the police. Then James got really mad and twisted his face all weird, and I can't explain it, but he started yelling, and it was like he wasn't the same person at all. He called me a slut and a cunt, and said that I was some ridiculous princess, and he just kept going. My friend telling him, that's nice, now you need to leave or I'm gonna make you, and then James threw down his box and punched my friend in the face. I don't remember exactly, but my friend fell back and James came up to me and he grabbed me and started shaking me, saying I was stupid for throwing this all away, and that I was probably sleeping with my friend. I was very afraid and I couldn't believe this was happening. My friend got up and grabbed him by the back of his shirt and threw him off me and shoved him out of my apartment. James ran away down the hall, kicking people's doors and screaming. My neighbor had come out of his apartment and asked what was going on, and I told him to call the ambulance because my friend was bleeding from his nose. I was so embarrassed. At the hospital I kept embarrassing myself, crying and apologizing to my friend while we were in the waiting room. His nose is broken, he keeps making Owen Wilson jokes impressions, but he is okay. Now, I am at my friend's house because I am afraid to go home. He said I can stay with him for as long as I need to. I feel really awful that my friend got his nose broken because I was a bad judge of character. I also feel really guilty that I got so scared I just kind of stood there and let my friend get hurt. My friend is taking me to the police station to file a report, but I just want this whole thing to be over. But he is being insistent because I need to do this to ensure my safety. This is my first relationship and I don't even know if this person was real. I didn't think this was even possible to happen. I don't understand what I missed and I feel like I'm vibrating inside because of how frightened I am. I want to go home to my apartment, but I'm afraid he will come back. The way my head is does not make any sense. I feel ashamed even writing all of this because it was from something so small and juvenile, so I don't know I'm just handling it weird or my head is blowing it completely out of proportion. How do I proceed now, after I file a report? Has anyone been in this same situation before? How do people hide that kind of anger for over a year? Why did this happen? I'm sorry for the questions, but I just can't make sense of my own thoughts right now. Now, for the next story. My ex-wife cheated on me with my golden child brother and gave birth to his baby. Now my family, which always hated me, begs for money after I get promoted. For years my life seemed perfect on the surface: a loving wife, a stable job, and the dream of starting a family. My younger brother Ethan was the golden child, adored by our parents and praised for every accomplishment. I, on the other hand, was the black sheep, always falling short no matter what I did. Still, I accepted my role and tried to find solace in my marriage to Emily, the woman I believed would stand by me when the world didn't. It was one evening when I noticed a shift in Emily. She grew distant, her laughter hollow, her touch fleeting. I dismissed it at first, chalking it up to work stress or the pressures of life. I should have seen the signs: the late-night phone calls, the sudden need to visit her parents. But I trusted her completely, blind to the reality unfolding around me. She was my anchor, my safe harbor, or so I thought. The day I discovered the truth shattered everything. A careless text left on her phone, a message from Ethan, exposed the affair. The words were simple, yet they burned: "I can't wait to see our baby." Our baby? The world tilted. My brother, my wife, and now a child. In that moment, my reality crumbled, and I was left standing in the ruins of my life, betrayed by the two people I thought I could trust the most. The moment I read the text, the air felt suffocating, thick with betrayal. My heart pounded, but my mind grew eerily calm, as if I were outside my body, watching the scene unfold. I knew I had to confront her, but I needed clarity, not rage. I waited until she returned home, her face lighting up with that fake smile she wore so well lately. I sat at the dining table, the phone placed in front of me like evidence in a courtroom. Her expression shifted the moment she saw it. A mask of guilt replaced her usual confidence, and the color drained from her face. "Whose baby?" I asked, my voice trembling but controlled. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her quiet sobs. She admitted everything: the affair, the child, the lies. She tried to explain, to justify, but it was just noise. Every word felt like another stab in the back. I didn't scream. I didn't throw things. I simply got up, packed a bag, and walked out the door. The betrayal was too deep, too painful to process in that moment. I drove aimlessly for hours, tears blurring my vision, until I found myself parked by a lonely stretch of road. The realization hit me like a tidal wave: my marriage was over. My brother had stolen what little happiness I had, and the child I thought would be mine was his. The days after the revelation blurred together in a haze of pain and disbelief. I moved into a cheap, lifeless apartment, a stark contrast to the home Emily and I had built together. My phone buzzed endlessly with messages and calls from Emily, my parents, and Ethan. I ignored them all. I had nothing to say, and I couldn't bear to hear their voices. The betrayal had severed whatever thin threads of connection remained between us. Eventually, the calls stopped, replaced by a final message from my mother: "We don't want this family torn apart. Please be the bigger person and forgive them, forgive them." The words stung. It wasn't just a plea, it was a command to let go of my pain for the sake of family unity. Ethan was still their golden child, the one who could do no wrong. To them, my pain was a mere inconvenience, an obstacle in their quest to preserve their image of a perfect family. I was officially the villain in their narrative: cold, unforgiving, and selfish. I knew the truth, though. They didn't care about me, they never did. Their loyalty lay with Ethan, and I was disposable. But something inside me hardened that day. If they wanted to side with the brother who destroyed my life, they could have him. I was done seeking their approval, done with their endless favoritism. I was on my own now, and that was exactly how it needed to be. In the weeks that followed, I buried myself in work. My job, once just a means to an end, became my lifeline. I poured my rage, heartbreak, and humiliation into every task, working late into the night, driven by the need to escape my thoughts. My boss noticed the change and, surprisingly, rewarded it. Promotions were whispered, recognition grew, and for the first time in years I felt a sliver of control returning to my life. Emily's betrayal had stripped me of everything familiar, but it also freed me from the constant weight of family expectations. I no longer cared about pleasing anyone but myself. The chains that bound me to their judgment were broken, and I realized I was finally living for myself. I attended industry events, networked with powerful people, and made moves that propelled me forward. With every success, the bitterness in my heart dulled just a little. One day during a quarterly meeting, I was offered a senior position with a hefty raise. I accepted without hesitation. That night, alone in my empty apartment, I stared at the offer letter and felt something I hadn't in months' pride. I wasn't the failure my family had always labeled me. I had built this success on my own without them. The satisfaction was sweet, but I knew this wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of my climb. Not long after my promotion, the inevitable happened. My phone rang and to my surprise it was my mother. For a moment I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. "Hello," I answered, my voice cool. There was a pause, and then her familiar tone, sweet, but with an undercurrent of expectation, filled the line. "We heard about your promotion," she said. "Congratulations. We're so proud." It was the first time I'd heard those words from her, and they felt as hollow as I expected. Then came the real reason for her call. She explained that Ethan's business had hit a rough patch, and with the baby on the way they were struggling financially. She danced around the words for a while, but eventually the request came. "We were wondering if you could help out." Just until things stabilized, I almost laughed at the audacity. After all the pain they'd caused me, they now wanted my help? The irony was almost too much to bear. I let her words hang in the air for a long moment before responding. No, the silence on the other end was deafening. She stammered, tried to reason with me, but I ended the call before she could finish. For the first time I felt the power shift. They had taken everything from me, and now they had the gall to come begging. I wasn't their safety net, not anymore. If they wanted to live with the consequences of their choices, I would let them. After my mother's call, the requests kept coming. My father tried next, his approach more direct. "You have the means now," he said, as if that justified everything. "We're family. Don't let resentment ruin that." His tone was gruff, full of entitlement, and it struck me how little had changed. In their eyes I was still the backup plan, the lesser son expected to step up when their golden child faltered. I calmly reminded him of the past. "You chose Ethan every time," I said. "You never cared about my well-being, so why should I care about yours now?" He dismissed it, saying I was being petty, that I should rise above it. I felt nothing but disdain. My entire life I'd bent over backward for their approval, but now for the first time I stood my ground. I hung up before he could respond, the finality of it echoing in my small, quiet apartment. Surprisingly, I felt lighter. I expected guilt, maybe regret, but there was none. I was free of their manipulations, their twisted sense of family loyalty. My success was mine alone, and if they wanted to come crawling now, they could choke on their pride. I wasn't their scapegoat anymore, I was my own man. A week later, it was Ethan's turn. He showed up at my door unannounced, looking worn and desperate. Gone was the charming golden boy, in his place stood a man crumbling under the weight of his choices. I didn't let him inside. Instead, we stood in the hallway, the tension between us suffocating. "I'm sorry," he began, his voice strained. "I never meant for things to get this bad." He told me about his failing business, how the baby's arrival had upended everything. His perfect life was unraveling, and he needed my help. "I can't do this without you," he admitted, a plea in his eyes that once would have softened me. "But not anymore. You did this to yourself," I said coldly. "You took everything from me, and now you want my help. Why would I ever do that?" He had no answer, only silence. I watched as the realization dawned on him I wasn't the same man he'd betrayed. I closed the door on him, shutting out his pleas and leaving him to deal with the mess he'd made. Ethan's visit marked a turning point. The family's desperation turned into bitterness. Word spread through relatives that I was being cruel and selfish. They painted me as the villain, twisting the narrative to suit their needs. I heard through mutual acquaintances that Ethan and Emily were struggling, but I felt no sympathy. They made their choices. My parents began reaching out less often, their messages growing colder. One final email from my mother read, "We're disappointed in you. We thought you were better than this." The hypocrisy was laughable. They had spent years dismissing me, belittling me, and now they dared to play the moral high ground. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Their disappointment no longer had power over me. My success, my happiness was no longer tied to their approval. I was finally free, and the family that had once loomed so large in my life had shrunk into nothing more than a distant memory. With my family's ties severed, I embraced my new life fully. Work flourished, and I used my newfound freedom to explore passions I'd long ignored. I took up hobbies, travel, writing, even volunteering at local charities. For the first time in years, I felt like I was truly living, unburdened by the ghosts of my past. People at work noticed the change. I was no longer the quiet, overworked employee. I was confident, driven, and ambitious. Invitations to social events rolled in, and I made genuine friendships, people who valued me for who I was, not for what I could give. Slowly, the scars left by my family's betrayal began to heal. One night, sitting on the balcony of my new, luxurious apartment, I looked out over the city and realized how far I'd come. I was no longer the man clinging to a broken past. I had built a life for myself, one that was vibrant and fulfilling. And for the first time in a long time, I felt whole. Months later, I received an unexpected letter. It wasn't from my parents or Ethan, it was from Emily. She apologized, genuinely this time, acknowledging the pain she caused and admitting that she had been selfish and cruel. She asked for nothing in return, only hoping that I could one day find it in my heart to forgive her. I read the letter twice, emotions swirling. Forgiveness didn't come easily, but I realized that holding on to the hatred only chained me to the past. I didn't reply, but I let go of the bitterness. I didn't do it for her or Ethan, I did it for myself. I deserved peace, and clinging to resentment would only rob me of that. From that moment on, I truly let go. The betrayal that once defined me was no longer the center of my world. I had moved on, stronger and wiser. And as I folded the letter and tucked it away, I felt a profound sense of relief. The chapter of my life defined by pain had finally closed, and I was ready to embrace the future, free at last. With the past behind me, I allowed myself to dream again. At one of the charity events I attended, I met someone, Sophia. She was nothing like Emily. Her warmth was genuine, her laughter infectious, and most importantly, she had no hidden agendas. We struck up a conversation that flowed effortlessly, and for the first time in years, I felt the stirrings of something I thought I'd lost hope. Sophia and I started seeing each other regularly. She wasn't just a distraction, she was a reminder that life could be beautiful again. She had her own painful past, and we bonded over shared stories of betrayal and resilience. There were no games, no pretenses, just two people finding solace in each other's company. Slowly, I allowed my heart to open, cautiously but willingly. As our relationship deepened, I realized that my capacity to trust hadn't been destroyed, just wounded. With her, I found healing. She taught me that love wasn't always pain and sacrifice. Sometimes it was gentle healing and exactly what I needed to truly move forward. Despite cutting ties, I occasionally heard news about Ethan through mutual acquaintances. His business had failed completely, and with no financial safety net, he was forced to move back in with our parents. Emily's dream of a perfect life had crumbled along with him. They were now living a life of scarcity, far from the golden pedestal they once occupied. A part of me wondered if they were truly remorseful, or just bitter that life hadn't rewarded them as they'd hoped. Ethan, once the pride of the family, was now struggling to keep it all together. Yet I felt no triumph in their downfall, only a strange, hollow detachment. Their suffering wasn't my responsibility. They made their choices, and now they were paying the price. My parents, once smug in their favoritism, were now burdened with the son they'd put on a pedestal. I imagined their disappointment as they watched the golden child falter. It wasn't my revenge, it was simply the universe balancing the scales. Sophia and I continued to grow closer, and for the first time I felt ready to introduce someone new into my life fully. She wasn't just a partner, she became my confidant, my equal. But the ghosts of my past haunted me, and one night I confessed everything to her: the betrayal, the heartbreak, and my family's cruelty. To my surprise, she didn't pity me. Instead, she admired my strength. "You've been through hell," she said, "but you didn't let it break you." That's what matters. Her words were a balm to my wounded soul. She didn't see me as a victim but as someone who had survived and thrived. And that's when I realized I truly loved her. In opening up to Sophia, I found freedom. I wasn't defined by my pain anymore. I was a man who had loved, lost, and found love again. And for the first time, I saw a future that wasn't clouded by the shadows of betrayal but illuminated by hope. One afternoon, while walking with Sophia, I ran into Ethan by chance. He looked gaunt, weary, a shell of the man he used to be. He didn't speak at first, just stared at me with hollow eyes. Finally, he broke the silence. "I lost everything," he said quietly. "I don't know what to do." I looked at him, expecting to feel anger or satisfaction, but there was only pity. "You'll figure it out," I replied, my voice devoid of malice. Just like I had to, there was no need for revenge. Life had already delivered its lessons. Ethan didn't argue or beg. He nodded, defeated, and walked away. It was the last time I saw him. That encounter left me surprisingly at peace. I had no desire to kick him while he was down. The past no longer had any hold on me. I was free, and seeing Ethan like that only solidified my decision to move forward with grace, not bitterness. The wedding was simple, just as we wanted it. No grand spectacle, no elaborate guest list, just the people who truly mattered. Sophia wore a soft, flowing dress, her eyes glowing with happiness as we exchanged vows. Standing there, holding her hands, I realized how far I had come. This was love, pure and unburdened by the past. There were no ghosts at our wedding, only the promise of a bright future. Our friends, who had become my family, toasted us with warmth and genuine affection. For the first time, I felt surrounded by people who saw me for who I truly was, not the scapegoat or the failure my family had painted me to be. As Sophia and I danced under the stars, I whispered my gratitude to her. She had given me more than love, she had given me peace. That night I didn't think of Ethan, Emily, or my parents. They no longer haunted me. All that mattered was the life I was building with Sophia. And as we fell asleep in each other's arms, I felt a quiet joy I hadn't known in years. With my career flourishing, I found myself in a position to give back. I started mentoring younger colleagues, many of whom struggled with personal challenges of their own. I shared my story sparingly, only when it felt right, but the lessons of resilience and self-worth resonated with them. Helping others heal became a new source of purpose for me. At first I didn't think much of it, but one day a young intern named Max approached me with tears in his eyes. "You changed my life," he said. "I thought I was stuck, but you showed me I could move forward." His words humbled me. I wasn't just building my own future anymore, I was helping others find theirs. It wasn't about erasing the past, but about transforming it into something meaningful. I realized that the pain I had endured wasn't wasted. It had shaped me into someone who could guide others out of their own darkness. And that, more than any professional achievement, became my greatest success. Months after my wedding, my parents reached out one last time. It was a letter from my mother, the tone surprisingly subdued. She acknowledged the hurt they had caused, though she didn't fully apologize. Instead, she asked for peace. "We're getting older," she wrote, "and we don't want to leave this world with bitterness between us." I stared at the letter for a long time, unsure of how to feel. There was no anger, no desire for revenge, but I also felt no need to reconcile. I realized that forgiveness didn't have to mean rekindling old ties. I could let go without inviting them back into my life. I sent a brief response. "I wish you peace," I wrote. That was all. No anger, no further explanation. It was enough for me, and perhaps it would be enough for them too. Ethan faded from my life entirely, though I occasionally heard whispers about him through distant relatives. His business never recovered, and neither did his relationship with Emily. They were no longer the golden couple, and the family's pride in him had withered away. I wondered if he ever thought about me, if he regretted what he had done. But the truth was, it didn't matter anymore. His fate was no longer my concern. I had spent too many years trapped in the web of his betrayal, and I refused to let it define me any longer. One day I realized I hadn't thought about him in months. It felt like shedding a heavy coat I had worn for too long. I was free. And that freedom tasted sweeter than any revenge ever could. Sophia and I welcomed our first child, a daughter we named Lily. From the moment she was born, I knew my life had changed forever. She was perfect, with Sophia's warm smile and a laugh that filled the room with light. Holding her in my arms, I felt a surge of love so overwhelming it brought tears to my eyes. I promised myself I would be the father I never had present, supportive and loving. I would never make Lily feel like she was second best or unworthy of love. Every moment with her was a gift, and I cherished it fully. Watching her grow, I realized that she was the ultimate testament to my journey. She was born not from the ashes of betrayal, but from the love and hope I had rebuilt with Sophia. She was the proof that life, even after unimaginable pain, could be beautiful again. Life settled into a joyful rhythm. Work thrived, my relationship with Sophia deepened, and Lily grew into a curious, spirited child who filled our home with laughter. I no longer looked back with regret or anger. The past was a distant memory, one that had shaped me but no longer defined me. One evening, as I sat on the porch watching Lily play in the yard, Sophia joined me. "You've come so far," she said, taking my hand. "Do you ever think about them anymore?" I considered her question and smiled softly. "Not really," I admitted. "They're part of my story, but they're not the whole story." And that was the truth. I had moved beyond the pain, the betrayal, and the longing for approval. I had built a life filled with love, purpose, and peace. And as I watched my daughter chase fireflies, I knew that the best chapters of my life were still ahead of me. A year after Lily's birth, I received an unexpected letter, this time from Emily. It was brief but sincere. She expressed her regret for the pain she had caused, apologized for her actions, and admitted how much she had hurt me and the rest of the family. There were no excuses, just a raw and vulnerable admission of guilt. Reading her words, I felt nothing but a quiet sense of closure. I hadn't expected it, nor did I need it. I was in a place where her apology didn't weigh on me anymore. I had already forgiven her, not for her sake but for my own peace of mind. Holding on to resentment would have only hurt me, but letting go had given me freedom. I didn't respond to the letter. I didn't need to. I had moved on, and in a way I could thank her for helping me find the strength to build the life I had. She had been a chapter, but now it was time for me to keep writing my own story. Over time, my experiences began to take shape in my mind as something more than just personal healing. They became a source of inspiration. I started writing a book about overcoming betrayal, finding strength in adversity, and the power of self-worth. At first, it was just a way for me to process everything, but soon it grew into something much more meaningful. The book became a modest success. It resonated with people who had faced similar challenges: heartbreak, family betrayal, and the struggle to reclaim one's life. Letters poured in from readers who shared their stories, thanking me for showing them that they weren't alone. The book didn't just heal me, it helped others heal too. What started as a cathartic journey for me became my legacy, proof that even the deepest wounds can lead to something beautiful. I was no longer just the victim of betrayal, I was the author of my own redemption. As the years passed, Sophia and I continued to build a life that was meaningful and fulfilling. We traveled to places we had always dreamed of, experiencing different cultures, tasting new foods, and creating memories that would last a lifetime. Our daughter Lily grew up surrounded by love, laughter, and the kind of stability that I had longed for as a child. One trip that stood out was our visit to Greece. We walked through ancient ruins, took boat rides in the Mediterranean, and spent long evenings watching the sunset together. It was during that trip that I realized how far I had come. I was no longer the broken man clinging to the past. I was someone who had found peace, joy, and purpose. Traveling the world wasn't just about seeing new places, it was about embracing the freedom I had fought so hard to achieve. Each new experience was a reminder of how much I had grown, how far I had come, and how much more there was to see. When my parents passed away, it was a quiet affair. There were no grand gestures, no dramatic goodbyes. They had been absent from my life for so long that their passing didn't bring the flood of emotions I might have expected. I had already mourned the loss of our relationship years ago, and now there was only a sense of finality. I attended their funeral, but not out of obligation. I went because I had to, because closure, even in the form of a simple goodbye, was part of my journey. I stood by the gravesite, surrounded by distant relatives who hadn't been part of my life for years, and realized something profound. I had finally let go of the past. I was no longer the son they had rejected. I was a man who had built his own life, and no one could take that away from me. In the years that followed, my life continued to unfold with purpose. Sophia and I raised Lily, teaching her the values of kindness, integrity, and strength. We watched her grow into a thoughtful, compassionate young woman, and I couldn't help but marvel at how different her childhood was from mine. My work continued to thrive, and I found new ways to give back to my community. The mentorship programs I had started expanded, helping countless others rise above their circumstances. I wasn't just living for myself anymore, I was living for the future. Looking back, I realized that my greatest victory wasn't in professional success, or even personal triumph, it was in the way I had chosen to live. I had broken free from the toxic patterns of my past, built a life full of love and peace, and created a legacy I could be proud of. As I watched Lily graduate from college, I saw a reflection of everything I had worked for, a life not defined by betrayal, but by the love and strength I had fought so hard to find. And as I stood there, watching her take her next steps, I knew that my story wasn't just about survival. It was about thriving. And that, in the end, was the greatest victory of all.